But I tell you what, it started back in '77 when I was in Head East. I just wanted to play good music. I was put in a band that I knew was going to make it. It did. We did it ourselves. We did everything weird, different. And because of this part of the country, especially in Kansas City, St. Louis, you guys helped us start out. And we ended up being a pretty big deal. And that would have been wonderful to have the end of the story, but the problem was the last 3 years of my career with Head East was pretty much the coke-out, drunken brawl. It's funny, you have this big dream as a musician to go out and play in front of thousands of people, and then you get to, but then you do it night after night after night. You don't get a chance to rest. You don't get a chance to go home. At this time, I had a wife and 2 kids, and was feeling very guilty because I was a typical rock star. I was going out doing everything I possibly could to be cool. Because I was following the rules of the world. It had nothing to do with Jesus Christ. In the secular system, it's not his world. He doesn't mess there. The enemy has full reign.
That's right.
And does that mean that every secular singer or group is terrible? No, it just means that I was. And the last 3 years of my career with Head East, I pretty much became a vegetable. The band kicked me out at the beginning of 1980. I went on a binge for 6 months that, to make a long story short, at the end of it, I decided suicide was the best answer. That same time period, though, my wife gets saved and kept trying to tell me about the Lord. The high point came, or the low point came, the day after my anniversary, where I passed out on the couch and wasn't able to go to a party that was designated for our anniversary. And I woke up the next morning. My son was looking at me as if I was some kind of creature. He was 1 year old at the time, and I looked at him, and a little voice goes, "You know, John, you're worth more dead than alive." You know, that voice wasn't God.
That's right.
But, you know, I said, yeah, that makes sense. I got off the couch, I sat in my chair, my kids were playing in the living room so they could be close to me. Decided I wasn't going to use a gun because that'd be too messy for them, so I started figuring out what pill combination would be right for me. Be quick and painless. And as I'm sitting there thinking about it, my wife comes and pats me on the back. "Now, John, remember, you promised to come talk to my pastor today." I said, "When did I do that?" He says, "Last night when you were really drunk." Guys, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, trust me. One of those things where she'd walk in just happy as a lark, and I'm sitting in my own pity party, and I'd say, "What world are you living in?" She'd, "I'm glad you asked." And then she'd try to tell me about the Lord, and I just wouldn't accept it. But that day she said that, and I said, "Okay, fine, I'll go talk to the pastor." And I did it because I wanted her to remember that I tried. I didn't have any qualms about thinking it was going to help me out. But I went and talked to the pastor that day with her. Hadn't brought my kids with me. I had a splitting headache, of course, as usual. Says, how you doing, John?" "Oh, I'm doing great. Just fantastic." You know, a little busy talking. All of a sudden, says, you know Jesus?" "Yeah, I'm an American. I go to church twice a year." Bad thing to say. All of that pastor, it was like, you ever see a cartoon where you got this nice little thing, and all of a sudden this monster comes ripping out of his skin. It was like that way. And he's like, "No, you don't know Jesus. You don't know Jesus that loves you. You don't know Jesus that has a plan for you. You don't know Jesus that's here right now. And you don't know that Jesus knows exactly what you're thinking right now." Blah, 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 blah. And next thing I know, I'm sitting in the corner of their patio room. I'm like, what is going on? Pastor comes up, "You want to know Jesus?" I just shook my head yes. And when I could say the sinner's prayer, I did it. And a weight lifted off me like I never knew was there. Later on, thank you. Praise God. Guys, I didn't realize how much bondage I was under. Guilt, debt, oh my gosh, you name it, it was there. And I remember getting up going, oh my gosh, what is this? Freedom, whoa. And I walked out with my kids in my hands, you know, holding their hands. Actually, my daughter, she's 5, she could walk. My son was walking my wife because he couldn't walk yet. I looked down at her and God says, I think it was the first thing he ever said, now, you know those treasures you were waiting to get, John? Because I used to think that I could get rich as a rock star, and then I'd make it all these things that I'd done to my family up to them.
Right.
All my friends, I'd be a rich man and I could make it all up to them. And of course it never happened. I saw rockers that we toured with that had #1 hit albums for months. They were so rich they couldn't spend the money fast enough. And all it did was it made them have to get more dressing rooms because they couldn't stand each other.
Yeah.
Fleetwood Mac, a perfect example. We did a show with them in Wichita, Kansas, at their auditorium there. There was plenty of, 6, 7 dressing rooms. The next time we played with them, after they had the big hit, we were put in a closet as a dressing room. I'm thinking, I'm going to the promoter and say, what did we do to you? Why are you so ticked off that we're in a, my ego back there says, we don't deserve a broom closet. I said, well, you got to understand, man, there isn't enough dressing rooms in this building for Fleetwood Mac. I said, what do you mean? They can't stand each other. I said, really? I said, and I went on stage and I was watching them. And believe it or not, I think God even back then was saying something to me, saying, there's never going to be enough money in the world for you. And that thought came back to me that very moment. And it was just an eye-opener. It was the beginning of a new life for me. And for the next 5 years, I functioned as an engineer. That's how I graduated as civil engineer out of college, and finally used it. And for the next 5 years, I did that as a mining construction engineer, a safety engineer, a cost and scheduling engineer. And each time there was a progression of raises, where each time I needed that much more money to pay the past debts. And God took care of my debts. It was amazing. I thought I'd never climb out, but I gave it to Him.
Yes.
It was so cool. Gave it to Him, and all of a sudden I'm out of debt. Of course, then I go back with Petra, and I go right back in it. Us musicians, what can you say? But it was just so amazing. And then one day, Bob Harden called me up after a few things that happened before then. He says, John, would you consider singing Petra? I said, yeah, let's do it. He goes, don't you think you should pray about it? Yeah. Okay. Hung up the phone, I looked at my wife, she's dancing all over the kitchen, praising God, and I said, that's good enough for me. 6 months later, I'm singing in Australia for the first time. I'm singing sober after 8 years.
Wow.
Guys, girls, you gotta know. Whoa. Was I scared? Was I nervous? Absolutely. I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if I could sing sober anymore. Actually, I couldn't. I went up there and blew my throat out after 4 songs because I was so excited, and had to relearn how to sing with a little bit of laying back instead of screaming my lungs out. But they were very generous and held up with me, and after about 6 months we really started clicking, and it's been 20 years ago. And I got to watch God operate in such amazing ways, using what I could consider one of the most worthless vessels, because I know myself, I know what I think, I know what I am.
Right.
And to be able to still choose to use me for over all these years has been an amazing, amazing thing. God is way past anything we're ever going to be able to imagine.
That's right.
And He's that same way with all of us. I got a song.